I am the voice you use when you lie to yourself. Just imagine hearing that whispered from the darkest shadows of your own mind. Pretty chilling thought, right? Well, today we're diving into a really grim, dark fable all about psychological survival. Welcome to This Explainer. We're going to be stepping into what's called the Bone Willow and the Sorcerer's Mirror. And trust me, this is an absolute trial of the abyss. So think of today's journey kind of like a Fichtean dialectic. You know, that philosophical progression of thesis, antithesis, and synthesis? But here it's playing out as this terrifying trial of the mind. Our starting point, our thesis, is the raw human drive for meaning and sovereignty. We're heading into the uncanny forest. Now, this isn't a physical place, it's a psychological abyss. It's a battleground for true sovereignty over your own mind. And to get there, our seeker has to face a dual trial. They're first to choose between authentic internal integration, actually knowing yourself, and the much easier, far more tempting path of performative self-delusion. Which brings us right to the antithesis of our seeker's journey, the parable of the performative wound. Picture this. Down in the damp moss of this forest, our seeker stumbles across a cynical sage known as the sorcerer. He's just lying there, trembling, reciting these incredibly dramatic poems of profound abandonment. He claims to have this deep wisdom born from being rejected by literally everyone. All he's asking the passerby for is a little bit of warmth and love. But, as we're going to see, this is a massive, dangerous trap. This whole setup brilliantly illustrates the core psychological conflict we're looking at. On one side, we have the sorcerer's stagecraft. It's loud, it's deceptive, it's weeping specifically to be watched. The sorcerers describe this performance as a shimmering oasis of the ego. But then, on the exact opposite side, we have the genuine introspection required of the seeker, which we see in the parable of the silent cave. In the cave, there's absolutely no audience. The seeker sits in total, absolute solitude, literally wrapping their arms around their own self-pity to actively transform all that raw bitterness into actual creative power. Let's break down the specific signs of this stagecraft, shall we? The sorcerer trembles. He recites tragedy. He claims wisdom from all his rejection, and he literally begs for warmth. But why? Because it's a totally calculated show meant to garner pity. It's specifically designed to trap a sovereign mind in this never-ending cycle of social conformity and mutual stagnation. It's an elaborate performance used as a shield against something way more terrifying. And that brings us to a really piercing question. I want you to imagine the voice of the sorcerer's internal devil speaking directly to you right now. He looks right at the cynical sage, and he asks, "Why do you weep?" Not because you are broken, because you want to be watched. Wow, that is the brutal reality of outward deception, isn't it? The sorcerer's staged agony isn't about healing at all. It's just this massive ego-driven defense mechanism. Still speaking as that internal devil, that voice you use when you lie to yourself, he reveals his actual motive here. He says, "I offer you the comfort of a staged tragedy so you never have to face the starry abyss where no one is coming to save you." Let that sink in. The sorcerer mimics suffering because facing absolute, cosmic isolation, that terrifying empty void where literally no one is coming to the rescue, that requires a kind of courage he just doesn't have. And here's the kicker. If our seeker actually indulges in this pity, they risk mutating into what the sources call the spirit of negation. Think of it as a cosmic vampire. It tears down concepts of beauty and nobility. It just sits in the mud and mocks the higher man simply because it lacks the creative spark to achieve greatness itself. Succumbing to this, it turns the individual into nothing more than a celebrated victim wandering around a totally self-inflicted wasteland of pure nihilism. But thankfully, our seeker refuses to indulge the sorcerer's little show. They shatter the mask of victimhood, and this forces the journey forward into the synthesis of our dialectic. So let's step into the parable of the bitter exchange, where we finally arrive at the very heart of the forest. Right here stands Die Knochenweide, the bone willow. This tree is the ultimate arbiter of truth in this uncanny forest. It takes one look at the sorcerer's polite altruism and exposes it for exactly what it is: a mask. The bone willow doesn't care about your staged tragedies or your polite fake virtues. No, it demands a brutal, honest confrontation with the absolute darkest corners of your own mind. When you stand before this tree,
Your internal devil is going to be screaming at you to offer up money or years of your life, or maybe your performative grief just to pay the toll. But the sorcerer, who's acting as this cynical guardian now, whispers the tree's grating truth. Gold is shiny dirt here. The tree completely rejects those shallow offerings.
So, you're probably wondering, what exactly does the tree want? Well, it demands the currency of sin. It wants a secret that literally poisons your own blood. To pass this trial, you have to hand over your actual, unvarnished malice. We're talking about the foulest act you've ever committed. That absolute darkest part of your shadow that you so desperately try to hide from the rest of the world. Which brings us to the ritual of internal sacrifice. First up, you have to completely, totally reject the sorcerer's shimmering oasis of performative pity. Second, you have to actually perform the internal sacrifice by feeding the roots of the tree with that unvarnished malice we just talked about. And third, through this incredibly brutal psychological integration, you take your raw bitterness and you transform it into creative power. This whole trade isn't meant to condemn you. It's actually to ensure you finally stop running away from your own shadow. This internal sacrifice reveals the ultimate psychological difference between these two paths. On one side, you've got the celebrated victim. They are totally conquered by the beast of resentment, forever changed to their own lives, just waiting around to be saved. But on the other side, the lonely creator. By refusing to play the magician, by completely refusing to put on a fake show of suffering, the seeker clears the path to invent their very own sacred values. They become the sole ruler of their own existence. But what if you fail? What if you just refuse the tree's bitter bargain? Well, let's head into the absolute darkest part of the forest for our final story, the parable of the yellow glow. Deep down in the shadows, the sorcerer holds up a mirror to the seeker. But instead of seeing their own face, it reflects a demon with glowing yellow eyes. This, right here, is the monument to psychological death. It's the final tragic state of a soul that flat out refused to integrate its 7 devils. If you don't take your inner demons and transform them into companions, all that unexpressed envy and repressed malice is eventually going to conquer you from the inside out. The internal devil actually gives one final, really chilling warning about this. He says, if you choose my performance over the tree's bitter bargain, you will never shatter the mirror of doubt. The sorcerer's mockery and his whole performance, it acts as this necessary friction to test your authenticity. If you avoid the bitter bargain, you're left as nothing more than a shadow in a library of failures. The only way to the light is straight through the dark. By staring directly into the void of the glowing eyes, the seeker finally, truly accepts the darkest corners of their own mind. They actually take that repressed yellow glow and use it as the very fire that fuels their renewal. They make sure their heart doesn't just freeze in hatred, but instead beats with a purpose that is as unshakable as the desert sands. Look, we all have a sorcerer whispering in our ear, offering us that warm, comfortable little blanket of performative victimhood. But true sovereignty, that requires walking right up to the bone willow and trading our deepest malice for actual self-mastery. So I'm going to leave you with this final thought for your own shadow work. When you find yourself facing the uncanny forest of your own mind, will you shatter the mirror of doubt or remain a monument to psychological death?